Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. The Third Degree Net Podcast.
Third Degree, the podcast, is brought to you by the Lindstrom Law Firm for wills, trusts, probates, and business law. Call 469-515-2559. That's 469-515-2559. Or visit lindstromlawfirm.com for a free consultation.
Well, hello there, FC Dallas Curious fan. Welcome to another episode. This one numbered 270 of Third Degree, the podcast. Hi, it's me, Peter. And with the July 4th holiday, which means it's the anti-holiday for one Englishman, Dan Crooke, he is abstaining from today's episode in protest. So it is just you and me, editor, founder of thirddegree.net and this podcast, and the original soccer influencer himself, the amazing Buzz Carrick. Come in, Buzz.
I like the way you put that. That was funny. He's abstaining.
He's abstaining.
Yeah.
He's still very angry about the Tea Party and the Boston Tea Party and the revolution and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Sticks in his craw.
Isn't he a citizen now? I thought he was a citizen now. Maybe not. I'll have to ask him next week.
He's a plant if he is.
Yeah.
Some nefarious stuff going on. I'm sure lots of the havoc going on in our culture and society here in the United States these days is somehow tied to some sort of weird espionage mission that Dan Crooke is on.
I figured it was Brexit.
Yeah, maybe. That may be what it is. So I actually don't know what Dan is doing or why he's not here or why we didn't wait to. I don't know. Anyway,
his extended family came into town, probably on his wife's side for he has people at his house, like a bunch of people at his house. So
yeah,
it occasionally happens.
Nobody wants to record a podcast when the extended family's around.
Yeah, 10 people standing behind you listening. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You do not want to do that.
No.
Well, I don't know how long of an episode this one will be, Buzz, but you and I will get around to much of the information as we can. Since we last talked, Dallas and Peter Luxon have played yet another game, and now he has chalked up his second loss. He is 2-2-0 in his 4 games. Second loss in a row as they went down at home to FC Cincinnati in a 1-0 loss. And I know that this is not a good thing when the one bright shining thing that Buzz appears to be trying to make everybody feel good about is that he played the kids.
Yeah. Well, no. That bright shining thing just gives me joy that he played the kids.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not saying that it's, depending on your point of view on how you win soccer games, you might think it's a bad thing, but I think it's a joyous thing because I think that's what this club does better than anything else, historically speaking. So getting back to that is joyful. And those are young kids that I've seen come through the academy, and I'm super excited for all of them. Well, Pundak is not, but still he was great, relatively speaking. So I was excited for that. But there were other good talking points, I feel like, in that game, even though they lost.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Why don't you run through those?
Well, Asier Illarramendi was incredible. And I jokingly made an apology to him in my breakdown of the game because at the end of the game, in my instant reaction, I picked Logan Farrington as my man of the match. Even though I considered Illarramendi and I considered Leggett, I picked Farrington because he got fouled 6 times, which told me that the other team thought he was the most dangerous attacking player. But when I sat down and looked at Illarramendi's stat line and exactly what he did and where he did it on the field, he was just absolutely spectacular again. There's a subtleness to his game that can occasionally go missing. And I will admit that, maybe on the one goal by FC Cincinnati, he probably could have done a little bit better. But then he is 34, so what do you expect, honestly? But in the context of the game, he had 102 touches, and I think the next highest player was like 45 for Dallas. He had 14 progressive passes, which is just insane. Most people that are having a good game have like 4 or 5, and he had 14. 87% passing. He was 3 for 4 on take-ons, which means he dribbled by guys. 3 for 4. That's incredible for a dude his age. 3 progressive carries, 3 shot creating actions, 4 shots from a guy that deep. Ideally, actually, is not a stat you like because you don't want him shooting from like way downtown, but that's what it was. He had 9 passes into the final third. And then on defense, he was 6 for 7 in tackles won, which is just insane. 5 for 5 on challenges won, which is when somebody tries to dribble past him and he stops it. And he had 9 recoveries. I mean, those are just absolutely obscene numbers across the board. He was amazing. I can't imagine what it must have been like to see him play in his prime day to day, and how that guy didn't play more for Spain is just really a question about the generation he was in. And it really is a treat to watch him. And I would just recommend anyone, particularly if you have young people that are learning how to play the game, encourage them just to watch him play. Take your eyes off the game and watch him. He is just spectacularly good. And we should appreciate him while he's here, because he's probably so frustrated it may be difficult to get him to come back for a second season, given how frustrated he is.
Well, it's this is a very weird and frustrating time, Buzz, because trying to do this podcast, trying to come up with something good or different to talk about is difficult. And with Peter at the helm, I'm, because he's never done this before, and I don't know if you just magically know how to manage a team like this or try to make it better. Do you see tactically things that he is attempting to do, whether they're coming off or not? I don't know if this is as important as what do you think he's tried to do to change up from what Nico was doing?
Well, predominantly shifting to a back four, I think, is really good. The players at this club have mostly played that, through the time here and probably at other teams. So there's a familiarity there, a comfort level there that's really good. Playing that way allows you to have more bodies in midfield that are not wingbacks, and allows you to get better hold of the midfield. We've seen Dallas's possession come up. Even against Cincinnati, they actually had more of the possession, more than 50%, that's unusual for this team. Granted, Cincinnati was depleted, and they played like Nico Ball almost played to just get their moments and score when they, and not really care about the ball and just be defensive and have really good shape, and they did that. But the other thing he's done is free up the tactics and let people get forward and let people try things, let people be inventive. And I thought, in this game in particular, I thought Logan Farrington was very good. He was making really intelligent runs, making intelligent drawn fouls where he was baiting guys into fouling him in really good positions, And so really we have to look for those moments. Like, in the big picture, Lucene has the same roster that everybody else before him had, Nico Estevez specifically, obviously not everyone else. Mm-hmm. He still has the same roster deficiencies. He still has the same glut of injuries. So, it's hard for him to do anything remarkably different, which was always going to be the case. I mean, no one was going to come in here and revolutionize this team overnight. It was always going to be the same roster. It's always going to have the same injury problems until they figure out what's causing such a big slate of them. So you have to look for small victories. The coach bounce seems to probably be over. He got really good 2 games with them, but now the next 2 not so good. But then the next 2 events against teams that are much better. Well, Seattle's not much better, but at least better than FC Dallas. Mm-hmm. So all we can do is try and judge him on, the tactics that he is rolling out, which I like a little bit better. Not ideal, but better. His sub rotations seem to be better. He is doing some rotation for management of minutes, but he's doing it in an appropriate game state manner, which is better and nice. And he's reacting to the game and trying to bring guys on earlier than Nico was. And now that we've seen these kids, granted it was from probably an injury, overwhelming situation that he had to go to these kids, but it was nice to see it, and so those are small victories, I think, in a sense. Now, is it going to be enough to get him to the job, man? I don't know. That's a big question. That's the problem in the end of the day, Peter, and we've talked about this before, is that the front office and the TD and the owner, they all think this is a playoff roster, and you and I probably don't. And that's what's going to come down to. Do they think that this is one, and should Lucene now be getting them in the playoffs? I mean, that's a really big ask.
It's frustrating because, I tend to think that people in these roles should know infinitely more about this game and this league and how this goes than I do. But this, Buzz, we're not idiots. We've been watching this team for almost, since day one. There's no way this is a playoff roster. And I guess the question is, do you think they really, if you got them at a bar, if this was the old Dave Durr at the Old Mill Inn outside the Cotton Bowl after a game kind of moment, and you had Dave in that moment of where he was, and had a beer or two and a little bit more honest than he probably should have been. If you did that with Dan or Andre Zanate, do you think they really think that this is a playoff quality roster?
I do.
Do you really?
Yeah, I'm not so sure, however, that they don't think that, thinking that Velasco and Giovanni and Paxton should be counted in that equation. They talk about really the only one that's surprising to them is Paxton. Well, right. So why do you think it's a play? They talked about how much money was missing from the cap. Well, then why do you think it's a playoff? You have to live in the moment, live in the reality, right? So there's no way, in my opinion, that you can look at this team as it is right now and the state of injuries that it has and think that it's a playoff roster. Now, if you think, as a GM, if you think that the injuries are the coach's fault somehow, I think you're crazy, but I really do think they think that, when they sat up there and said that, it's not like they looked sheepish. When they said that, they looked like they were convinced, they had this how, dare you question the fact that we think that this is definitely a playoff roster, And I would have thought, in a perfectly blank world where everyone's healthy, I would have probably agreed with them. But given the way it actually has gone, there's no way in hell. Right?
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think the frustrating aspect of that is that I guess in a perfect world where everybody is healthy, it is a playoff roster. But that doesn't even begin. I feel like we're beating a dead horse here. But that completely ignores the fact that two key players are still coming off ACL injuries.
Right.
You have no idea as to what kind of quality they're going to give you this season. And I think we can all predict it's not going to be very much.
Right.
And so many other elements of this roster that were healthy at the beginning of the season, or somewhat healthy, were high-risk players in terms of age or injury history.
Yes.
And all of that has blown up in their face to some degree or another. And so that's why I find all of this extremely frustrating. And I get even more frustrated when I start thinking about the coaching situation, because it appears to me once again they have done the exact same thing they did when Oscar resigned, is they have no backup plan. Like Peter Luxon is a very nice man, got an amazing playing pedigree and all of that. But he should not be the head coach of an MLS team at this point. and I don't know why they think they can make hay out of any of this. I just don't understand the thinking.
Yeah, all I can come up with is that if you look back to Nico's first season, when they remarkably got through that season almost completely unscathed with injuries. There were very, very few in that first season, and the team was great. They finished in, third or fourth, right?
Something like that, yeah.
This is awesome. This is how it should be. But then that's almost impossible. It's very, very, very rare that you can have a season with that kind of injury situation. What you're more likely to get was what you got last year and this year. I mean, if you look through the MLS injury report, every team has got 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, not every team. There's probably 3 or 4 teams that don't. But almost everybody, because this is the norm, is to have 4, 5, 6 injuries. Where you have to consider the problem with your organization is if you have the same recurring injuries over and over, which they have a lot of in the same kind of people. And as you say, Peter, they have a whole lot of people wired up in a whole lot of roster and cap and everything else wired up in people that are injury prone. And they should have seen that. That goes back to the idea that I suggested at the beginning of the season. If you expect this season to be a season where you compete, you cannot have a DP sitting on the bench doing nothing. You have to replace Velasco for the season and then worry about how you get out of it later. And they were like, what? No. And here we are, right? The season's over. There's no way, or not no way, but you in order to get 43, 44 points on the season, you now have to have less than half a season left to get 24 points, right? You have to double what you had in the first half, basically. It's like, it's not going to happen. So, you don't go from playing nothing to great overnight unless you can magic wand and get rid of all your injury problems overnight. And you're completely right that no way Velasco and Giovanni come back at a significant level in order to help you. It's over by the time they come back, and it won't be soon enough to be able to help you. The deficit is too big. And so the bottom line is their acceptance that was going to be the case is mind-boggling. And I don't know what else we can do about it except try and live in the moment at this point and say okay, what do we see that's good as we wait for whatever the next phase is. We either wait for Luxane to win enough games that he gets the job, or we wait for the next head coach to come in here, whoever it's going to be, and then see what they're going to start doing.
Yeah, but isn't that's really the catch-22, which is if let's say we like him so much as a person, we want him to succeed and end up winning this gig. That's going to require them winning games. But for him to win games, he's got to have a roster of players capable of winning games, and he doesn't have that right now.
Right.
And maybe that's so. That's what I think is really what makes it feel like the rest of this season is just wasted time. Which then also makes me feel like the entire Nico Estevez era was wasted time. Like I felt like the Luchi Gonzalez 3 years was wasted time. And I just find all of it very, very frustrating.
Yeah, I might have felt better if they would have said to Luxane, take the cup and the Leafs Cup and try and win those. But in everything else, we understand that it's too late to make the playoffs and salvage the season. Play for the future. Play a bunch of kids. Play some guys on the bottom of the roster that we haven't seen. Let's find out if those pieces are worth anything as we build forward. And then you can stack the deck, do rotations so that when you get to these cup games, you go max out cup games and try and play for that silverware and sacrifice points in the regular season. That's what I would have done. But then again, I'm not in charge, and I don't think they currently have a playoff roster. So, there's a bunch of things wrong with this roster. But, it's not always just talent. It's like the way you construct the roster, the way it doesn't match with the way the coach tried to play, the way it's imbalanced with old guys versus young guys, the way you've broken the system. There's a whole bunch of things going wrong with it, and I'm not sure that how much of it's going to get fixed. And next week, I'm going to do a post on like what I think they should be the strategy going in the window, because they arguably have the bigger, more important window about to come with an interim coach, and it's like, who's picking the direction of all this stuff? I tried to ask about that, and they were like, "Oh, Peter Luxane is," and it's like, dude, he's an interim coach. Yeah. Why is he involved in the discussion about what direction the team's going for the next several years? This is the big window. I know it's not in terms of this current season, but it is. This is when the big players are available. The money guys, the big international window with all the players available is going to be this one right now. So
I guess but here's the thing. And I think that's the obvious question, and the obvious problem by putting him in this role creates for the club, which again takes me back to this. Like, I don't think this was part of any kind of plan. This feels like, and if this is part of some sort of plan, it's the weirdest plan.
Yeah.
That makes little to no sense. Which is, how are they going to approach this transfer window? Are they going to do anything? Are they going to spend any money to buy any players and replace Paxton, or sell anybody, or make any moves? I've seen nothing anywhere. I've heard nothing on the wire as terms that people feel like Dallas is getting ready to do A, B, or C.
Yeah, well, they've been saying since a couple of weeks into the season, Coach Nico Estevez was saying that in the next window they were going to need to get a center back. So that's still true, despite the fact that before the season, Sonata said they were fine at center back. Clearly they're not. So clearly they need to, at some point, get a center back. If it's not for this season, it's for next season. But now's the time when there's more available. And then the other thing they're going to do is replace Paxton, because, as they've said, they need the body in midfield. Now, I've suggested that you might as well not do it now. You might as well just go with Diego Garcia for now, because you're going to have Paxton coming back, and you have his contract and you have all that kind of stuff.
We assume.
So we assume. Well, unless they use the buyout on him, but that's they're going to, and we think that an extra second buyout is coming. You worry about the mechanics of like how you clear things when you get to the off season, to a certain extent. But at the same time, it's like, if you really want a top flight center back and you know that there's a couple other contracts that you'll need to get rid of, you don't bring in a high priced midfielder too. Also, along the lines of the midfielder, they have sold off Jose Mulatto. I was surprised to learn that the loan of San Antonio did not clear his international stat and his U22 initiative signing. So apparently the loan was the wrong kind of loan to do that, I guess. So those two things were just cleared. So they've cleared the deck for potentially a replacement of Paxton in likely a U22 initiative form. So another sort of Delgado-ish Enes Solly type player. Or Giovanni Jesus, not Enes Solly, Giovanni Jesus is the other one. So that's kind of the direction it feels like they're going, because otherwise I don't know why you would trumpet that sale, opening up those things, if that's not your plan. So that seems to be what's happening. It also seems to be reactionary. It's like it's all a reaction to what happened in the first half of the season. It's not what they thought coming into the season. So I think you're going to see something, I think you're going to see an attempt to do something. Now, can they pull it off is the bigger question. I don't know. And I don't know that either one of those things are going to make it go, oh, yeah, now we're winning 75% of the games and we're going to make the playoffs. Like that kind of turnaround, I think, is an unrealistic expectation for a center back and a kid 8. Mm-hmm. Whether it be Diego or whether it be a U22 initiative, who those guys tend to take a little longer to really, like Giovanni took a little longer and Delgado took a little bit longer to really get going, half a season or so. So expectations are low, in fact, for me.
Well, yeah, I don't know why anybody would anticipate Dallas would make any considerable moves in the window, because to make this roster good enough to really be competitive would be not one move, not two. I mean, it's going to take a lot to get something done, and a lot of creative movement in terms of moving players around and clearing out cap space. I mean, the roster is what it is. And, it's funny how we're having this conversation, this podcast, when a week ago we were having this whole conversation about how they should be creative to figure out a way to get Weston McKennie to come back if, in fact, Weston was coming back to the league. Yeah. I mean, we're literally just 7 days apart from this conversation, and here we are just like, could you just do something? It's like that meme, come on, do something. Because other teams are making moves, and that, not that this is directly relatable, but the Dallas Stars and the Dallas Mavericks are also in this same, fighting for the same entertainment dollar in this same, metro, and their seasons are over, and they are making moves all over the place, and one of which is, a really, really big time deal that is getting national attention, and you just go back and look at your MLS team locally, and you're like, yeah, they don't care. They're just going to fart out the rest of this season.
It's not helping that other MLS teams, because the European seasons are over, people know that they're now out of contract or that they're available. So some MLS teams are making pre-window signings. Like the actual MLS window doesn't open until the 18th, which is 2 weeks from now still, basically. So, but teams are lining those moves up so that the minute the window opens, you push the paperwork through.
Have you seen what Atlanta and Garth Lagerway have done? They are clearing the decks, man.
Yeah, Garth Lagerway is the best GM in MLS, and he has been for over a decade. He won titles at RSL. He left there for Seattle, won more titles at Seattle, and now he's going to do the same thing for Atlanta. The guy's the best.
And he's selling off, 2 or 3 guys, or 3 guys that are going to net them tens of millions of dollars. And they're making, and Austin has already signed somebody. I'm going through the list. I actually, before we started recording this, I went through. I just wanted to see what kind of signings they've done. And multiple teams, to your point, Buzz, are already making moves in this part, and Dallas is one of the few teams that has done squat.
Yeah, well, we have to hope, and we're going to cross our fingers, that since that early part of the season when Nico Estevez started saying we need a center back, that they've been working on it, and we just don't know about it. The group here that does things is a pretty small group. They're pretty tight about letting information out domestically. We usually only learn stuff when it comes out overseas. So the best we can hope for is that they've got something brewing. They don't even like to do pre-contract announcements, but there easily could be a guy lined up and ready to go. And for all we know, he could even have his paperwork done, and they just haven't announced it. You know what I mean? So I'm hoping that that's the case, that we're going to see a center back. But the thing is, though, is because your team's as rough as it is, and because of the injuries you still have, you're right. You can't really expect a move that's going to push you into the playoffs and make this a competitive season. So these moves you're going to make, they better be about next season. You better have a plan. You better have an idea about where you're going. And that's why, again, it's a problem that Peter Lucine, interim coach, is involved in these discussions. That's going to damage your ability to get a really good coach if he's not going to be around for this window, and he's going to have to deal with a roster that you're going to hand him from your GM and your interim coach this winter. If it is going, let's say this winter, it's not Peter Lucine, and miracle of miracles, the Hunts go, hey, Jurgen Klopp, why don't you come coach us? And he goes, dude, I'm not going to come there. I wouldn't be able to get any players. I spent $250 million at Liverpool adding players over the first season and a half I was there. I can't do that with you. I'm not taking that job. Now that's an absurd conversation, but the same conversation will happen, relatively speaking, with whoever they're going to try and get this winner if it's not Loxane. So,
well, let me reverse that. What kind of player signs a deal with a club not knowing who his manager is going to be? What kind of quality of a player does deals like that? That's a player looking just to get a deal and make money. They don't.
Yeah.
I can't imagine a guy would sign a deal to go play for a club, no matter what the money is, having no idea what kind of manager he's going to be playing for.
We see people, especially young kids, jump at the any situation like, oh, it's Europe, I'm going, right?
Yes,
so, like,
of course.
There's going to be lots of countries where young kids are going to be like, oh, United States, I'm going. And there will be a slate of people that'll be like, you know what? I'm reaching the end of my career. My wife and my kids, you know what? They probably would love to live in Dallas. Maybe that's not true if you're playing in the Netherlands or England or lots of European countries. But if there's a whole big, huge chunks of the world where playing in the United States for I don't care who it is still pretty cush. You know what I mean? Like a lot of those players that came here from South America, even though they don't play for FC Dallas anymore, are long gone. They've all stayed here. The Rangers have the same thing. When they get players that leave Dallas, leave the Texas Rangers, a lot of them stay here, for various reasons. So the lifestyle is pretty nice. But
do you think that if the manager situation was at the time what it is currently right now, an interim manager with no professional coaching experience was in place back when they began negotiating with Illarramendi, he still comes here?
That's a tough one because I have to figure that the coach being Spanish was a part of the influence. See
what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, I totally agree.
I think that the problem that they've created for themselves is a two-way street. It is what kind of player wants to sign this summer in a club in transition like this with no idea what they may be dealing with after the fact. And what kind of guy wants to sign up with the club who didn't get to sign any players in the big transfer window?
The answer to the first part of that is people that care more about the off-field and the lifestyle than they do the actual competitiveness of the team.
Okay, but is that the kind of guy you want?
No, I'm not. I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, okay, we're in agreement. I'm saying yes, you're right. It's only going to be a guy that cares about the lifestyle. And the second half of that is a guy that's looking for the first break. This is why people are like, oh, Bruce Arena's available. Are you kidding? Stop it, dude. There's no way a guy like Bruce Arena would take this gig.
Right.
It's like he has to answer to Sonata? No way. Dan Hunt's going to be 2 doors down and knock on your door every day at 2:00 for his meeting? No way. I didn't build the roster? No way.
I feel like I keep having this conversation in two different hands. I'm having it currently with people for FC Dallas and also the U.S. men's national team. Oh, we're going to go out and get Jurgen Klopp or Pep. No. None of those tier 1 guys are wanting to take the U.S. men's national team job. That is not a desirable job, period, the end. It doesn't pay enough, and all of the other reasons I could list off why nobody like that is ever taking this gig until after the World Cup. And then when people are like, well, why can't Dallas go out? Because the Hunts are never going to pay the money to get that done, and everybody else in MLS already knows how badly this organization historically has been run. It is.
Yeah.
You and I both know how many times have we had conversations with people in the media and from other clubs or league related across the league over the last 28 years that all look at each other, well, since the Hunts took over, and I'll go, yeah, it's not a very good organization.
No, like people have asked me, one or two people have asked me, like if Greg Berhalter were to get fired, would he be a person that the Hunts would look at for this team? Sure. But Greg Berhalter is just coming off of $2.2 million this last year in overall compensation, and the FC Dallas job pays something like $400,000 or $500,000. We think, based on people we talk to,
right?
It's like no, it's not like it's like, that's why it always ends up being a guy who's on like his first MLS gig.
Every time.
In
fact, every time minus Oscar.
Yeah, and Oscar only did it because he had the relationship. Obviously. Right. And they only went for it. That was the one time they paid a club to get a guy out of a contract so they could have Oscar. It's because they had a 15-year relationship with Oscar.
It's funny. You mentioned that, and it made me think of something I was thinking about the other day, which is this weird I mean, this has really become clear to me of late, which is this running trend of the Hunts doing something that everybody goes, hey, that's pretty impressive. And you see something success out of it. And it's almost like a shiny object that they get obsessed with. And then if you just give it enough time, it's like they get distracted and then they don't keep tending to it and it just kind of fades out. And I think you can apply that to a lot of things related to this club. You can start with the stadium. Like they went out and they built this stadium and they've let it kind of fall into disrepair, right? You can think about the growth of the 2016 team and how they got so close to putting together something unlike this league had ever seen before, and then they just let it fall apart. They then went out and kind of got to a point where they grew the academy and have really made it the best academy in this entire country, and they've kind of let it kind of fall by the wayside too. You can then go back and think about the team, like this weird new era that they put together where they sold a lot of players, made a lot of money, put it back into the club, and everybody started feeling like maybe something really new and great was getting ready to happen. And then they didn't really do all the supporting work to kind of let it sustain that, and it kind of fell off then too. And I'm sure I could think about 5 or 6 or 7 different kind of examples of this, but it just feels like the Hunts don't have the ambition. It's like they have the ambition to do something and make it really interesting and great, but only for a short period of time, and they don't nurture it and grow it. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, how's the Texas Soccer Walk of Fame running?
Yes, that's another great example.
That's my personal pet peeve.
I mean, let's talk about the work that they did in marketing and correcting the attendance problem with this club.
Yeah.
I mean, how long have they been the running butt of joke in this league about attendance? Forever.
Oh, yeah, forever.
And now suddenly, they're selling out games and everything. And now maybe it's, the stands are not as full as they used to be. I know they're calling them sellouts, and maybe technically they are, but you and I both know they're not. It's just another example of their inability to sustain success and quality for any period of time, and it's maddening.
Yeah, the butts and seats is dropping rapidly. It's the maintaining the quality at the highest level is the issue. Because I've had this joke about FC Dallas's betting thing for a long, long time, because the Hunts have done some things correctly, right? They've because of the academy, because they've invested enough in certain areas, they have sustained, generally speaking, a relatively modest to good level of winning. They've only missed the playoffs, I think it's 8 times in their existence. But they're always just slightly above mediocre. They're always good-ish, but not great. They get to a very short window of great with Oscar, and they don't keep it up. It's a maddening combination of better than most, but not good enough to actually do anything, and that's very frustrating. And I've actually said this many, many times, and I know you remember this, Peter, is that like lots of times we'll be like, hey, that was a great idea. How was the follow through? How was the execution? Not so good. So many good concepts and so often little follow through, and I don't want to seem like we're just piling on all the time, but this season and the last couple of years, for example, is a great example, right? You built the roster for the first season under Nico Steffes, which is 2022, I think it was, if I'm not losing my mind. That roster came together perfectly, and the health came together perfectly, and everything worked out, and that team was quite good. And when you were ready to take the next step, you took the next step in all the wrong ways. You didn't maintain it. You couldn't keep the health up. You operated in ways that let it decline. So this is the second straight coach where the first years look promising, and then the 2 seasons afterwards have declined. And it's like it just happens again and again with this team. It's the reason why Oscar climbed the mountain once and then left. And Shellis climbed the mountain and then it fell off hard. Colin Clark climbed the mountain and then they fired him. They didn't even give Morrow a chance to climb the mountain. Because they heard they could get Shellis, they just fired Morrow. So
yeah, well, I mean, you can go look at clubs across the world and all the leagues, and this is kind of the norm for most clubs. They go through cycles, and managers come and go, and things happen. And I do think that the Hunts feel like that is an okay way of operating. I have said this 1,000 times. I admire the Hunt family for being the longest sustained multi-sport generational professional sports ownership group probably in the entire world. You know, the number of teams that they own or have ownership parts in, the number of championships they've won, is all very impressive. There's a reason why they've been able to do that. And part of it is because they run these operations as proper businesses and care about the bottom line.
Yep.
And I don't begrudge them for that in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I admire them for their stick-to-itiveness to doing that. But it does come at an expense of creating enthusiasm, sticking to the idea that really your goal is excellence and championships. And I just think, kind of like with the U.S. men's national team, there are a lot of really weird parallels as a fan of both of these things for me. It's hard to get excited anymore about either one of these things when you really begin to kind of touch grass and take a reality check. You just understand, hey, it is what it is, and you got to find the element of it that makes you happy and gives you a reason to enjoy and support it, I suppose. And that's about it.
I suppose. And this comes back to when everyone has asked me why I've done this for so long, and it's the idea that, you know, you and I grew up without having Division I soccer, and I'm just glad there's a team in my backyard. And since this team would have folded if not for the Hunts, I'm forever grateful that they saved this team. This team would not be here if it hadn't been for them. The stadium would not be here if it hadn't been for them. So that's great. And the fact that it's consistently pretty good, I'm grateful for that, because most seasons I get to go out and watch a fairly decent product on the field. I don't ever get to see any championships, and we don't ever get to see any like superstar teams, but we get to see a relatively pleasing product most of the time. That's all great. And if you're happy with that, like I am mostly happy with that, that's awesome for those of us that are. But at the same time, I would like to occasionally have the team try to be excellent. And I don't know that it does. And they probably would be mad that if we said that we're saying this, like, how come you guys never really can put it together? And they'll say, oh, we work our best, we do this, that. Well, I know you do, but you don't. It doesn't happen.
Somebody asked me this question at my game the other night. After our game, we were all sitting around talking, and somebody said to me, where do you think everything would be if Lamar Hunt had not saved the burn?
You mean, like, would there be a soccer team here?
Yeah.
I think if Lamar Hunt had not saved the burn would have been folded, and then the Tampa
it absolutely
team,
would have been. Yes, yeah, it would have gone away.
Yeah, that's not our opinion. That's a fact.
Yes, correct.
The Miami Fusion and the Dallas burn would have been folded. The reason that Dallas burn was not folded was because Lamar Hunt agreed to take on ownership of the Dallas burn. That's a fact. So. That team would have folded. Tampa Bay Mutiny would have stayed in the league. And between now and then, Dallas being a top 5 market, it would have gotten a team somehow. It would have been probably a USL team, because I don't know that there's a rich soccer person in this town other than the Hunts, because like people say that Cuban's a soccer fan, but he's always said over a million years, I'm not interested in that. Would Jerry Jones have done something? I don't think so. I think he's got a money printing machine over there with the Cowboys. As far as I know, there's not anyone MLS rich enough to have done a team here other than the Hunts. And of course, I could be wrong. So I think we would have a USL championship team here.
Somebody made the contention to me that if the burn had folded and time went by, in this last 10 years of expansion and growth, Dallas would have been a priority for the league to add. And you may be right. There may not be somebody obvious in Dallas that have done it, but somebody would have put the coins together to put a team back in the Dallas area, potentially build a stadium somewhere. I mean, my big objection to that, or what, I don't know what the phrase I'm thinking of. My kind of argument against why that would prevent this from happening is I don't know where anybody thinks there is real estate available in Dallas proper to build a stadium that would make sense financially. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, okay, there's that piece of land over where Reunion Arena used to be. Right. Well, you don't have, God doesn't have enough money to pry that away from the Hunts to build a soccer stadium on it. You see what I'm saying? And so you may have people with enough money to pay the fee to MLS to do the team, but where was this stadium? Where's this mythical urban stadium going to go? I just don't know if that exists.
That's a fair point. I think that in that universe, you're right that Dallas would have been a market that, as a top 5, top 6 media market, that would have been a market that the league would have prioritized. But at the same time, look at the markets that they've gone into, right? There have been major markets they've not gone into because they don't have the right kind of big pocket superstar owner in some of these places. Like, you can look at even markets now that fit the description of being these major markets that don't have an MLS team. So that's my question is like, maybe there's some out there I don't know about, but there's nobody like, if that was the case, like Donnie Nelson wouldn't be enough. Like Donnie's been trying to get a soccer team in Fort Worth, but like nobody else really has in this town been talking about this idea. No one's been like, oh, I'm going to get a USL team. No one in this town that I know of has ever tried to buy the team from the Hunts. You know what I mean? So it's like, I'm not sure that there would have been the pocket. Now, even if you had, could you have found a stadium? Maybe something in Fair Park. Maybe some other city would have ponied up. Maybe Arlington would have ponied up. Like, Arlington's trying to have all these stadiums. Now, the current Dallas mayor, maybe he would be like, oh, I'm the sports guy. Remember, that's his whole shtick. So maybe you could have, but it's an impossible question to answer. But I think there would be at least a USL team here, if not another MLS team. Somebody would have done something. It's too big of a media market, but
yeah. Well, it was all part of a conversation where somebody suggested to me they wondered if soccer in Dallas would have been better off if Lamar had not saved the burn.
It might have been. That's a good question.
Which which actually to me in many ways feels like sacrilege to even ask.
I mean, it's such a hypothetical. It's it's a good conversation for a bar over a beer, but I don't know if it's really worth because it's not anywhere close to the reality of what actually happened.
No, you're right. Yeah. Well, okay. So here we go. We're getting ready to let's get back on track. Sorry, I derailed us. My apologies.
It was fun.
So they got Portland. We're recording this on Wednesday, the 3rd. The July 4th game is Portland. Portland is, sorry to tell you guys, kids, in 5th place. And, it's probably going to be quite a challenge for Dallas, who obviously are in bad shape at this point. Portland is on a, 7-game undefeated streak of 5 wins and 2 ties, coming in here with a bit of power behind them. So, what do you got? What do you think he's going to do in terms of lineups, Buzz?
Well, Delgado is still out. Liam Frazier will be out 3 weeks. Jesus Ferreira is out like 2-3 more weeks. Obviously,
so all of your midfield players. So let's take an accounting here. When the season started, who was on the roster as center midfielders? There was Illarramendi.
Yeah.
There was Paxton Pomykal.
Yeah.
There was Patrick Delgado. Yeah. There was Liam Frazier. Sebastian Lletget. There's 5. Who else?
Zeke and Sebling, I guess.
Okay, Zeke and Sebling is 6. Anybody else?
Thomas Pondeka.
Okay.
Who made his debut. Yep.
Norris?
Noel Norris, yeah.
Kiddo?
There's another homegrown named Alejandro Ozura who is not moving the direction.
Nobody knows who that is, Buzz.
Who that is, yeah. Well, technically he's on the roster.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you asked, so, yeah, he's not even playing for North Texas right now. So he's had a bunch of injury problems, and it's not going right for the kids.
So of those 8 players, Illarramendi is thankfully, knock on wood, healthy. Paxton is out. Delgado is out.
Yep.
Frazier is out.
Yep.
Is Sebling healthy?
He technically he's off the out list. He was on there last week with an illness, so he must be ready to go then. So,
okay.
Cross your fingers. Yeah.
Pondeka. Okay. Yeah. So we got nothing.
Yeah.
There's no whole lot of
Right.
nothing. There's like a 34-year-old ex-superstar and a couple of kids for the center midfield tomorrow.
Yeah. So now we come down to some questions. Like the coach rotated the team a little bit. Like Musa got a break. He got some guys in and out, various things. So now it comes down to like, what kind of formation do you want to play? Like, is he going to try that 4-1-4-1 that I like so much with Illarramendi playing that single spot? Or is he going to go with what he's done with Moore, which is the 4-2-3-1? And I think that with Frazier out, if you're going to play 4-2-3-1, your really only choice in that other spot is Norris. He's the only one that sort of fits that deep spot. Now, I'd be okay with that. I'd be fine with that. But I think this is actually a moment where if Nsebling is healthy again, you can bring him in and go with that 4-1-4-1 look. You don't have Frazier. You don't have Jesus Ferreira, but you have Sebastian Lletget. He can play right there with Siki. You have Kamungo, who wants to be a little wider on one side. Farrington's done a nice job as one of those guys, so you can do that. So I think that makes a lot of sense. As much as I would say, leave Norris in there, I think it won't. As long as Lucine's still trying to win games, I think he'll go with the slightly more veteran players, and I think that lends itself to that shape. Now, you could easily drop in Siki or Lletget next to Illarramendi instead. That's a perfectly acceptable idea, but I think he'll try and play those guys, whichever one, a little bit higher, and then you get that same basic shape. The back, I don't think will change at all. Areola, Farfan, maybe they'll try and sub in a Junko or an Omar later and try and spell some minutes back there, but really, that's about it. There's not a lot of choices available because of all the injuries. And really, it's just how do you rotate that shape in midfield around Illarramendi? Who are you going to pair with him? Who are you going to try and prop this thing up with without having Paxton? Because you're not going to have Paxton the rest of the year. So what works best? And I think that answers that question. Or however any particular person wants to answer that question. And my guess is that Nsebling will be back in, and having split time with some of these other guys in the last game, you'll be able to split time with some of them again, and that kind of is what you're looking at. Musa should be back. That'll help. So it's not optimistic. The trick is that you then this weekend you have Sporting Kansas City twice. You have them Sunday, and then you have them in the Open Cup Wednesday. And remember, optimization of the Open Cup is a real thing. So by resting a couple people, like resting Musa last game, you can bring him back this game. And then you can, on Sunday against Sporting Kansas City, you can rest maybe a little bit again in the league game. And then you could stack again for the Open Cup game on Wednesday or Thursday, whenever it is next week. So it's a weird situation that Luxane's having to try and work his way through when the priority might not be the league game.
Poor guy.
And his roster is just jacked again. So I think if you're going to use Norris again, maybe you use Norris again on Sunday and bring a Siki back in this game if he's healthy. And maybe Musa's in this one, and maybe Musa gets another game off, or vice versa. And if you play your cards right, could Jesus be back right in time for that Open Cup game, possibly? Crossing your fingers. So there's a lot of, he's in the same situation Nico was in. He's got so many missing pieces, and yet this heavy load of games where the priority is maybe not even the games that you might ordinarily throw aside. The priority now is the Cup game. So it'll be a dance this week, and I think that's how you're looking. I'm predicting the 4-1-4-1 tomorrow with Siki and Lletget in front of Illarramendi, Farrington and Kamungo. That's my guess right now. So
I guess time will tell. We will see.
Time will tell. This is actually fun for me. This kind of thing, because these are fun puzzles.
This reminds me of the wonky sky high camera view of the U.S. game
we
the
didn't
other
talk
day.
about that. We didn't talk about that. Yeah.
Yes, I know. Every time for that entire however many minutes it was on there, I was like, Buzz is having the very best time right now.
So good. Yeah.
All right, we'll come back to that.
Yeah, like when I watch the game, like everybody else, I'm not enjoying necessarily the kind of soccer I'm seeing, but I did enjoy the kids. And so, but these puzzles of like, who do I have available? What kind of schedule do I have coming up? How do I play the tactics that the coach wants to play? Well, I say how does he? This is always about what they're going to do, not what I want to do. It's kind of, this part is fun for me. So, I get that enjoyment at least going into the game, and then the game starts, and I'm like everybody else. I'm like, oh.
Well, I'm glad you're having a good time, Buzz, but I think this generally sucks.
It does stink. It does stink.
For the 28th year in a row. All right.
Yeah. There've been good times.
Yeah, there's been a few.
All right. You want to talk about that camera?
Yeah. So, if for those living under a rock, at the beginning of the game at Arrowhead Stadium, where the Chiefs play for U.S. Uruguay, it was the most impossibly like tall angle 3/4 field shot you could possibly imagine, and immediately the internet lost its frickin' mind. And the entire time I kept thinking, this is Buzz's favorite camera angle of all time.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah. So good. Just because it gives you like a sight. Like I like to sit high and central so I can see the tactical shapes as they happen. So that's why I like that camera. All right, so
But that was a technical problem, right? That's all it was.
Probably. Let's talk about that. So the first thing to understand is that the broadcasts of those games, like the World Cup, like the European Championships, the broadcasts are done on a world feed. The group in charge of the tournament, in this case CONMEBOL, maybe possibly in partnership with CONCACAF. The European Championships is a UEFA product. FIFA World Cups are a FIFA product. They hire a production company to put on the games, and obviously there's an interaction between those two things. They and the production company, with probably the managing group's approval, hire producers and directors. They also hire a tech company to put all the equipment together. So at some point, this was the first game at Arrowhead for this tournament, and it was the only game, so there was no chance to see it ahead of time. Someone with authority at either the production company or with CONMEBOL/CONCACAF decided that location was the appropriate location for the game camera. They met with the stadium, or at least exchanged data. Where are the positions we could put cameras? Those are all built and predetermined. They can run cable if they have to, but most of them are fibered already these days ahead of time. So somebody decided that high center spot on the front of the third deck was the ideal place for the game camera. And then one of two things happened in this scenario. The first is that it's possible that the low camera angle they eventually changed to was supposed to be the game angle and that there was a problem. I've been on several broadcasts in my career where a camera craps out 2 minutes to air and everyone is scrambling to fix the camera and get it back up. If it's the game camera, you just say, what other camera is dead center? Okay, you're now the game camera. So that easily could have been a case where the low one crapped out, the bad cable, bad lens, bad whatever. Okay, just use the high camera until we get it fixed. So that's entirely possible. The second option was that somebody really did think that was a better camera angle, someone that had never been to Arrowhead before to do a soccer game, which is entirely likely because they're a product like this, they're going to hire producers and directors from South America or Europe or whatever, people that have an established worldwide reputation in this game, not some local Kansas City director. So the second option is that it's so bad that people are screaming at the tournament, screaming at FIFA, screaming at CONCACAF, screaming at whoever, the Fox, and that enough people, it worked its way up the chain of command through Fox perhaps. And Fox is the biggest bidder, or one of the biggest bidders for rights, called somebody at CONMEBOL and said, hey, what is this stupid camera angle? And then it trickled back down to the producer in the truck, like, why are you using that camera? Is there a different camera you could change to? So that's like a 30-minute process. So that's entirely possible that could also be the case. So anyone yelling at Fox is like, you're yelling at the wrong people. Fox had nothing to do with that. Maybe you eventually got them to change by yelling at Fox, but Fox has nothing to do with it. Fox is taking a world view.
I obviously, and for those, I assume everybody listening to this podcast knows that Buzz knows what he's talking about because this is what Buzz does for a real job, which is game production, television production. You've been doing it for almost 30 years.
Yeah, 30 years.
But maybe there are new listeners that don't know this about Buzz's actual real life career.
Fair.
I'm going to say, Buzz, it seems improbable to me that it is not the first one. Because there's no way an experienced producer director looks at that high angle camera and goes, oh yeah, that's great. We're sticking with this. There's no way that happens. At least I hope not. So I'm going to go with the broken equipment and they scrambled and did the best they could until they got it fixed option.
Well, the one reason I would maybe not say the one reason I would believe that is because that higher position is really good for an all-22 camera. And so if they lost the low one, they might have said, hey, all-22, your game instead, go. 2 minutes to air. But generally speaking, the main game camera is one right there at the 50-yard line at the lower position. Right next to it, 99.9% of the time is camera 2, which is a tight follow camera, like a replay camera. And so 99% of the time, if you lose camera 1, your game camera, you just say 2, your game. It's like that's what would happen. So why it would go to a high one is what's confusing to me. That's why that's the one thing that makes me think it might not have been the technical. Now,
maybe 1 and 2, both, maybe whatever they were plugged into, because that's probably the same networking port. Maybe it all went out right there at the same level.
Easily could, you're right, because it would have been the same fiber jump probably right there in the stadium. So they easily could have lost both cameras in that location. That's entirely possible. It could have been power. It could have been some fan going crazy and spraying them with paint. I mean, you never know. There was a
climate change protest.
Yeah. Oh, there was a game. I think it was a Champions League game one time where some protesters took big, huge cutters, and cut the power cables to the truck and took down the whole thing with these right outside the stadium.
I think I remember
So crazy things can happen to a camera, or even 2 cameras together that could cause it to go down. And the thing that makes me think
was the Russians.
Now, the reason I did think maybe is very possible, not very possible, perhaps 10% possible if someone shows that camera, is if you've never been there and you're from Europe or South America or whatever, you might think, man, that high spot right above the field looks really cool. It reminds me of, there's a couple of there's a couple of English teams where the sideline is super tight, where the camera is literally on the front of the roof. And the camera almost looks, I think it's maybe Everton, the old Everton.
Goodison Park. Down. Goodison Park is like that.
So I can see a world where someone who's never been to Arrowhead is just looking at like an email they got of the locations to go, yeah, that high center camera on the top of front of their decks would be there. That's a great camera. I'm super excited about that. So I don't have an official answer, and I promise I know people that are involved in this thing. I will try and find out, but I may not be able to, but I will try.
Okay.
So I just wanted to, it's so fascinating to me, and I thought I should provide what expertise I do have in this scenario and talk about the 2 possibilities and stop yelling at Fox. Fox has nothing to do with it.
I laughed and giggled the entire time thinking how much fun you were having watching a soccer game from the all-22 position.
Yeah. Oh, it was so good. Yeah. And then they changed it. I was like, oh, no. Why did you go back?
You couldn't tell who was who. Buzz.
I felt bad for Strong and Stewart, who kept going like, why are they showing us that replay? We have no control over this. Don't yell at us.
It was like playing Football Manager when everybody was when the graphical the original graphic version of it was just dots moving around a green.
Oh, it was so good. And some people asked me some people said, "Oh, it's the camera on a cable." No, it's not, because they showed replays of the camera that's on the cable.
No,
and that's
it's
the
not
one
the
that looks
Skycam.
straight down.
Yeah.
The yellow card / non-stoppage play, the definitive angle was the one that was the straight down cable camera. This was not that. This was a basket or a position on the front of the third deck looking almost straight down. And that only happens at Arrowhead because that Arrowhead is built very vertical. Like the upper deck is almost on top of the lower decks. So that's why it was so on top of play. And I loved it. It was so good.
Man, Buzz, you make me horny when you talk TV talk.
There's 2 camera locations at Toyota Stadium too. Like there's a lower and an upper camera, and depending on who comes in there, they change that upper to lower. The one you see on MLS is usually one of the top of the stands, right?
Don't you remember the entire conversation that we had? It was a big conspiracy theory, because typically the game camera at Toyota Stadium is the one right in front of the club at the WinStar, right behind section 106 and 107.
Typically,
right. But when Austin showed up and started sending over like 5,000 fans to a game, remember they started using the camera in the press box that came at a higher angle, so they could cut off the angle so you couldn't see the Austin fans, and we all speculated that was an active choice they made to try to hide the Austin fans. Do you remember that conversation?
Yes, I do. Now that you say that, but back in the day, they used to use that higher location more. For depending on who was coming in there, some teams like that higher spot.
Yeah. I remember it would, depending on the game, it was either I don't know what the technical term for those tiers are, but the press box camera or that little you call it basket or whatever, that's right there behind section 106 and 7, right at midfield, just outside the window. I think that typically is the one they use for game camera these days, isn't it?
Yeah, generally now. And there's still one in the booth. Usually it'll either be doing some kind of replay type follow, or it'll be like an all 22 look. And they use it or maybe it's just for talent if you're going to put talent on camera, although current MLS doesn't do that. So if there is one up there still, and I haven't looked lately, but sometimes they're both up there. It just depends on, well, not now. Now they have a uniform plan, but it used to be that you would sometimes get 2 cameras up there in the booth, which makes the booth really hot because the windows are open and stuff.
And before we go, everybody should take a minute to go over to Buzz's website, thirddegree.net, and read your interesting article that you posted today about the Academy. And it's perfect timing because this is also part of the reason why I was thinking about the Hunt's inability to sustain excellence for any period of time is how the shine has come off the Dallas Academy over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, a tiny bit. Come
on, it's more than a tiny bit.
No, it's just a tiny bit. We went through a little bit of a spot where there was a little bit of a drought in the Academy, but it's picking back up again. But what's changed is that we're not seeing. Well, the main thing that changed is everybody else actually got into the Academy game. For a long time, Dallas was it. And so nobody else was producing talent, and now everybody else is producing talent. So the other thing that's happened is that they've lost 5 or 6 coaches that had sexier names, like former pros, former MLS players. I'm not a guy that thinks that all coaches have to be former pros, but you want a little bit of that because you want some star power. You want some attractiveness in terms of a famous name for some recruiting. You want different perspectives. You want former player perspective. You want a former non-player perspective. You want variety. So right now there are no former MLS players in the main Academy coaching staff. There's a tendency to not have as many U.S. youth national team stars as there used to be, although we're seeing a little bit more for other countries like Mexico or Jamaica or Honduras and things like that. Dallas did not penetrate far into the postseason tournaments, but they were the only MLS team that had their team make every single bracket, and one of 3 teams overall that did that. So there still is some quality there. They're still turning out the pro players, but it's not as good as it was. So I wrote about some of the symptoms that are showing why it's down a little bit, and some ideas about how they could make it better. One of the big problems, of course, is that Nico Estevez wasn't playing kids, and so it all was stagnating back down the pipe. Therefore, the younger players were staying in North Texas. Therefore, no academy was getting into North Texas. Therefore, none of the kids are playing up inside the academy, and all that is pushing back down and hurting. Mm-hmm. So it's a multi-tiered, nuanced issue. Some of it has to do with structure and some various things. And if you're into the academy, I think it's pretty good. It is all fixable. Everything else can get better, except that because everybody else now is also doing this, it'll never be clearly by far the best by itself again. That won't ever happen again. But it can be back to closer to where it was before when they was churning out talent. Between 98 and 03, the talent that came out in that bracket is just absolutely insane good. And hopefully it can get closer to that than it is now.
Well, everybody should go read that. It's an interesting read. I don't know if it'll make anybody feel good about the situation, but I do think you give a fair accounting of the current situation. Want to do a little kit talk real quick?
Sure.
Before we end this?
Yeah.
So are you aware of this rumor? I don't even know if it's a rumor. It could be official. I haven't been paying close enough attention. That MLS later in July is going to be revealing something they call the archive collection, which is a certain number of teams are getting a third jersey.
I'm aware of the third jersey part, yeah.
Okay, well, they're calling it the archive collection, apparently. And have you seen any of these kits?
Yes, they're fantastic.
Yeah, I've only seen a few of them, and I don't know.
I've seen 3.
What have you seen?
The Miami one, which has like the Miami Vice style Miami on the front.
Right. Okay, I've seen that one. Okay.
The LA Galaxy one is like a throwback to early LA Galaxy. It's really, really good.
And doesn't it just say Galaxy across the? It's like true throwback because the logo of the club is giant across the chest. There's not a sponsor on the front.
None of them have sponsors. That's correct. Yeah. Why they've decided that none of them have sponsors, I don't know, but. It is a big chunky team name across the front. And one of the things that makes the Miami one really good is that it's basically Dolphins colors and it has the old school Miami Vice style Miami text. And then the Galaxy one is the split black and green from like the Kobe Jones era, which is really nice. And the third one I've seen is the Timbers one, which is a sort of a maroon with a script Timbers across the front, which is a throwback to like the NASL days with them. So those are the three I've seen. They're really good.
Oh, actually, I'm looking at them right now. Yeah. Okay. Oh, Kansas City gets the old rainbow jersey. Have you seen that one?
I have not seen that one, but the old Kansas City rainbow jersey is a great jersey.
Okay. Well, I didn't know if you were aware of this. I just saw this the other day.
It's quite good. You know, I'm jealous, of course. I don't know if what they would come up with for the burn would be any good or not, but you know, it's certainly it's certainly good stuff. And if the league continues to do, you know, good stuff like this, it could be a win. I mean, you know, there's a lot of old good brands that have good positive stuff in them, you know, that can be used in a throwback way like this. And I'm sure that they could come up with some good Dallas Burn FC Dallas stuff. Now Dallas won't get it because they don't sell enough jerseys, so they'll never get like a third jersey. But not unless they completely change their ways.
All right. Anything else you'd like to discuss?
Just congrats to let me make sure I say his name right. Leo Oreja Reina, who is the academy pick for the MLS Next Academy All-Star game. So he got picked. So congrats to him. He's a U17. So cool for him. Yep. He's one of those kids that's actually signed to North Texas technically. So that's cool.
I've been trying to get Julian Eystone on the kick around. In fact, I'm on this new crusade to try to get a host of Dallas Tide players that made it, quote unquote, on the show. I've been trying to get Tanner on the show. Like Tanner's in town right now. And I've been trying to work through some connections to get him to come on the air and do a segment. Especially, have you seen the news that he's signing a deal with Enter? Have you seen?
I saw that it was progressing. It's getting close,
like apparently that is in the works. That would be amazing. Although he's getting loaned back to Venezia for the season. Julian, we're going to try to have on the air. I'd love to have Jaden Shaw on the show.
Yeah.
Weston obviously would be a huge one. All of those. Clint, all of those. So we're hoping to have Julian on, but in the conversation, he's already begun training with Brentford. And they posted something from Brentford B, the B team, posted something on socials today making that announcement. And I think that's really cool that he's playing with a Premier League club these days.
Did you see what the name of that was, that thing Brentford posted? It was the Brentford Buzz.
Oh,
so I had to let everybody know that no, I had not moved to Brentford.
You didn't. You weren't part of a package deal along with the Texas, the North Texas tree.
Peter, I tried so hard to be a partnership package deal. It did not come together. By the way, let me know if you need a couple of names for guys that have made it from FC Dallas. I got a couple for you.
Who else should we have on? Let's talk about.
Well, Johan Gomez, who's plays in Germany and was a member of the most recent U20 team. US U20 team.
Yeah.
You could do Nico Carrera, who also plays in Germany, who's Antonio's older brother. He's on Holstein Kiel. You can get him.
Yeah. I'd love to have like Chris Richards on the show.
Chris Kappas
on the show.
Who's in Norway right now, I think. You could have I'll just have one. Oh, Charlie Kamen.
Kelman, yeah, because
he's
back at Leyton Orient, and I know actually Kent Teague, the owner of Leyton Orient, has been on the show a couple times.
And JT Jonathan Tompkinson, who plays for Norwich City, he's a member of the Olympic team, the U.S. Olympic team.
Yeah,
he played at FC Dallas for a couple seasons. He was an ECNL player, and then he went up to. They had an injury problem, and he went up to the academy. And originally was on the outside, and then they started, because of all the injuries, they started playing at center back. And then when they got their other guys healthy back again, they were just like, you can stay here as like a reserve player if you want. He goes, no thanks. And so he went to Solar, and he started for Solar for like a year. And then on his own, he went to Norwich as a U18. He went to Norwich City.
Yeah.
Norwich. And then he worked his way up, and now he's in their first team. I don't know how much he plays for their first team, but because he's a member of the U.S. Olympic team, so it's a bit younger, but he's a guy that would be successful.
Ricardo Pepi would be a good one.
Pepi would be a good one.
You know who else would be interesting? One I think would be fascinating to talk to is the original Frisco kid, Keaton Parks, who's up at NYC.
Yes.
Is he still with NYCFC?
As far as I know, I think so. I haven't looked at their rosters lately, but You could always get Jogo too, who got left out of the Olympic team because he's at a club that doesn't like to release people.
Right.
But he's definitely one to consider.
Well, we'll see how successful I am at this this new mission I'm on. We'll see.
Right.
All right. Very good. Anything else you want to throw in here, Buzzard?
Sure. We're doing a 4th of July sale on our T-shirts, 10% off on the shop. If you go to my Twitter handle, it's chill. You go to my Twitter handle, 3rd Degree Bet on Twitter, and you'll see the code there. 3rd Degree, the podcast, is brought to you by the Lindstrom Law Firm for wills, trusts, probates, and business law. Call 469-515-2559. That's 469-515-2559. Or visit lindstromlawfirm.com for a free consultation.
Very good. All right. Well, maybe Dan will uncover from family time for next week. But thank you, Buzz. And,
thank you.
Everybody have a tremendously awesome 4th of July weekend. Hopefully some good comes out of it. And we will speak to you next week on another edition of 3rd Degree, the podcast. Happy birthday, America.
3rd Degree, the 3rd Degree Net Podcast. 3rd Degree, the 3rd Degree Net Podcast. 3rd Degree, the 3rd Degree Net Podcast. 3rd Degree, the 3rd Degree Net Podcast.